Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me and see me. Okay, so yeah, I hope you had a great day so far. My day was pretty good. The only thing is that, it's raining outside. That's always a little annoying. I mean, it's cool when you're working, but it's not cool if you know that in a few hours I will stop working. We'll see. Great. So yeah, thanks a lot for joining. I'll quickly start with an introduction, and then we'll start with the actual content. So I'm Christian. I am psychologist, Scrum Master, and also the initiator of Project Scagile, and co-founder of Echometer. As you probably have seen, Echometer is sponsoring as the health check and retrospective tool Project Scagile. And Project Scagile, what is Project Scagile? It's all about sharing best practices to help you to succeed in your agile transformation. That's what it's about. And also to build up a little community to share those best practices. Because we have a big network from Echometer, and we thought, okay, let's make something out of that. So within Project Scagile, what we did is we interviewed dozens of experts internationally on this topic of how do you succeed with your agile transformation, because roughly 50% of agile transformations still fail. And so today's topic is about culture. I really like that topic. I actually like all of those topics, but this is a very interesting one for me as psychologist. Who are the experts who you will be seeing today? They are all having a lot of experiences in the background in Agile. They have seen multiple Agile transformations and also are, basically all have a training in scaled Agile framework, large-scale Scrum, and that's what we looked at, having this, this practical experience background and the education and training. And we asked them for Agile best practices to help you in your Agile transformation, as I said. And just to be sure, maybe you have already seen this. This is an on-demand webinar, which means, it would be really hard to get 11 experts from different time zones together at the same time for the webinar. So we decided to do this in a recorded way. So yeah, I will start a video soon now. And it's not a live webinar, just to be sure. Yeah, so I wanted to just, to set the right expectations. This webinar is not about to give you exactly, a framework, not another framework where okay, I have to do this, and then my agile transformation is finished. But it's about inspiring. It's about giving you hints, thoughts, ideas that can help you very practically from, tomorrow on. Okay, what can I do differently to make sure in this case that our culture is heading in the right direction? Okay, what else did I want to say? So I guess that's it. That's the most important stuff. I recommend to take out a pen because, again, it's, a lot of information in a short amount of time. Take out a pen and write down everything that you like. And then we'll see us at the end of this session where I'll quickly do the outro. Thanks a lot for joining. Have fun. I will start the video now.
It's interesting, right? Because everybody wants to change their culture. Oh, we're going to have this culture change. And just because leadership wants to change the culture doesn't mean culture is going to change.
For me, as organizational psychologist, what can I say? Culture does eat strategy for breakfast.
More than tools and methodology, it's essentially a mindset change.
Humans just resist change, and that's the biggest challenge.
Getting people to accept change.
Changing our behaviors, changing our beliefs is really difficult.
The cultural shift. That is often the most challenging, and that's where we need to spend the most time.
Most people, when you want to change something, they hem and haw, they're hesitant, things. We've been doing this forever. Why do we have to change?
As Agile coaches start working on the processes that need to be smoothed out in order to get things working, we also have to be very aware of people issues. So not only do we have to look at the process and find the bottlenecks, but we also have to start resolving conflict at the team level, conflict above, and fear. One of the things that Agile does is it brings an amazing level of transparency to day-to-day work. Many people have never had that. And suddenly you're changing that and say, yes, you're going to meet with your team every day and talk to them. And maybe we talk to them at the coffee shop or whatever, but we don't necessarily communicate about the work that we're doing on a daily basis. So that is a big cultural shift.
Okay, that's why we are here. We want to make sure that culture is supporting the change that is happening. And I talked about this Agile Metrics formula in the last webinar on Agile Metrics, which is basically saying that culture is a key ingredient to create customer value long term. And that's typically the main reason why we're doing our transformation. So given that, how do you change culture? And what's interesting to me is that, culture is such an old topic, but it is still a thing apparently, looking at the annual state of Agile from 2020, where culture is, one of the biggest challenges still to implement Agile methods. So let's get into it. Where do we start now when we want to transform culture? I recommend to start with creating trust, because there's so much new happening, and you are saying this had advantages in the end for the employees, but maybe the employees don't trust you, and that is a huge problem. So where do we start with creating trust? It is actually one of the key pillars of the Agile methodology, transparency. You have to start being very transparent about what you were doing, why you're doing it. People have to be able to come into every meeting, basically, also of the leadership team. You have to get step by step into this transparency mode and philosophy of Agile. That is one of the key things that you are doing, I hope at least, anyway, because you are implementing Agile step by step. The next thing is this.
One of the biggest ones is this, is do what you say. So if you're a leader and you're saying that we're going to do this, and you're not doing those practices that you say you're doing, then people will know right away that, well, this is a culture of liars. I'm going to represent the way that you act as a leader. So if you're going to act as a leader with vulnerability, if you're going to act as a leader with an area of curiosity and as an area of support, then I'm going to work in that way. What interests your boss is what people will do. So do what you say, okay?
And then anytime that they bring issues to you, take a note, type it down, acknowledge, repeat. You said this is what I understand, or this is what I'm hearing by that. Okay, because you said this, I am going to do this. And when you do it, communicate, I did this for you based on what you asked for. Then people can come to you, oh, when I go to Kristen, he's going to solve my problem.
Do what you say. It's very easy to say something, but the hard thing and the more relevant thing is to actually implement it. And this especially applies to leadership, who are obviously a role model here, and especially in the beginning of transformation, it's key, that first impression counts, to do what you say. And what's also relevant and helpful in creating trust is this thought.
I personally believe that the good thing about the Agile culture is that it is very close to our default. How shall I say that? It's default to us. We as human beings, we want to trust and be trusted. We want to learn and teach. We want to contribute, see sense in what we're doing. That's very human nature. So very often if you have a problem in culture, it's because we have forced something onto our employees that is not natural to them. So how do you foster a culture that allows for Agile? I would just say, try to be human.
Take them out of the mindset of work. Make them feel valued. Might be as simple as a team building event. Might be as simple as let's go watch a baseball game, or like let's go watch Freiburg play Kaiserslautern or something. We don't have to watch it at the stadium. We can watch it at the pub. Oh, the pub is closed because of COVID. Okay, we get on a Zoom call. Everybody on the Zoom call, bring your own little glass of beer, sit, and let's watch the game together. Without talking about work. Once the mind is relaxed, it's easy for you to build that value, respect for people.
As managers, as leaders, allow the human side of you be part of your daily work. Don't answer back, I don't have time for that meeting because I'm in 10 different meetings at that time, when in reality, you are taking care of your children. Yeah, you can just answer that back. You can answer, hey, I'm taking care of my children. It will slowly but steadily create a human culture, which is very close to the agile culture. And I would say that's basically it. It's not easy to be done, especially if you as a company have a long way to go, but it's a fun way to go. It's really good. It creates identification for your employees. People identify with companies like that. It's very attractive on the job market, of course. So I can only recommend that.
I have a little thought experiment for you. Think about how many people you don't like at work. And now think about how many people you don't like when you are on vacation. Probably there are more people at work who are stressing you out. Now, why is that? One of the reasons for that is probably that people at work, they want to appear perfect. They don't want to be vulnerable. They don't want to show mistakes. They're basically not showing that they are human. And this is hard to relate with those people. And it's harder to like them. So to build trust, be yourselves, be human, and be vulnerable, show mistakes. Another interesting, very small step here is to be open about the pictures that your kids are drawing, as Kevin is doing, as you can see in this picture right here. He's open about it, and this is a very easy step for me to feel like, okay, he is a human. His room looks as weird as my room looks. Okay, I can relate with that person. Another very small step that is really helping here is to have a check-in on every Monday and ask, what did you do at the weekend? And yes, that is about private things, but again, those private things that are helping to relate to people. We are doing this at Echometer since like a few months now, and this is really helping to relate to our employees also, because for example, somebody was saying, I was biking, that's a simple thing, or another person said, I was visiting my sister in the hospital. And when you hear that, you get the whole person, you finally understand the whole person. And so that is a very easy step, a very specific thing that I can recommend to do in teams to create this culture of trust. Okay, but we want to be very smart about this. We want to hit the nail with the initiatives that we are doing. So when we talk about culture, whom are we specifically talking about?
So in any team, when they are doing the project, I think the most interaction they have is within their own team.
Okay, so it sounds like a very easy sentence, but it is important to understand. When we talk about culture, for most of the people, this is mainly influenced by their team. If they talk about culture, the organizational culture at home, the feeling about this will mainly be created by their direct colleagues. And now we have to ask, who is responsible for the culture in my team?
So what happens is when all the organizations get reorged and they said, okay, we are a Scrum team now. So usually what will happen is that people who were project managers or the managers, they would generally become product owners or Scrum Masters. If that is the case, you have to be very cautious that these people are really coached. The people who are sitting in these meetings with their team, they are really coached to allow and enable and encourage the teams to speak up. Otherwise, they will not speak up in front of their, if there is a hesitation, unless the culture has already been there like that, there's a hesitation for a team member to ask in front of their managers or project managers too many questions.
And I would say like the hardest nut to crack is the mindset of middle management, right? They often say that's sort of that frozen the layer that you're just going to hit. The topsoil, those are the teams, those are easy to dig, but then you're going to get to that frozen layer or level of management that doesn't want to change, right? They've done things the same way for years. And it's moving from that command and control to a servant leadership mindset. And that takes time, right? And that takes a lot of guardrails, right? So you can't just go from command and control to, the training wheels are off and everybody's just doing their own thing. No, you have to see, okay, what guardrails can we put on now, knowing that we're going to start to loosen those, right, to where we're building trust again. So I would say that is a personal journey for a lot of leaders.
So culture is organized in teams, and teams are heavily influenced by middle management. So that is where you have to keep an eye on. Maureen summarizes it again.
That's really the most important thing, is that the teams are usually the easiest to change. The highest level of management, they're all about it. It's the middle managers that, if you're really looking at a cultural change, start there.
Scrum Master and product owners are very, very important. If they enable and encourage the team to ask the right questions, team will ask. If you are asking your product owner, hey, tell me why we are doing this, if product owner is not coached properly, they may see that as challenging their judgment. Why you are asking me this question? I have already talked to business and I have done this. And this, it's not important for, or the answer maybe it's not important for me to know, or versus it's not important for you to know. No matter what top leadership says, hey, I'm committed to this and that, it wouldn't happen, because top leadership is not there in every meeting. So these two roles are really important. How you staff them, how you coach them, how you enable them, they heavily influence it, these two people, right? All other are external people. They can support in terms of resources and philosophy, but these are the people at the ground level.
So typically, very often now, middle management gets this new role of a product owner or a Scrum Master, and you should differentiate between those two roles.
More than product owner, I would say Scrum Master, because Scrum Master eventually has to tie. If product owner, there is often a good tension, good conflict between product owner versus team. So Scrum Master is the one who really has to coach for the best practice here and has to influence. And I have seen these situations. Sometimes even a Scrum Master reports to the manager who is the product owner. Then you don't have too much of a chance. that is not at all a good practice, where your product owner is the manager of this team. It's a complete no-no. And in our organization, we had strongly, when we were forming our arts, we strongly put that guideline that this is not how it is supposed to be.
One very specific thing that you should talk about and that you should train on, your Scrum Masters, product owners, and middle management is this one.
A lot of coaches benefit from thinking in terms of the Cynefin framework, where you have complex, complicated, chaotic, and simple or obvious. And I think realistically, when you look at organizations, if they're very, very big, generally you're going to have many, multiple of these quadrants in the same organization, where maybe over here in web development, maybe they're in, perhaps the complicated domain, maybe at a different side of the organization, maybe it's fairly simple and obvious what's going on. And, the cause and effect relationships are very clear. So I think that too is something you need to be aware of, that large organizations, different parts of it, you tend to see different things.
Okay, now let's get back to the earlier question. How do you create this mindset shift of middle management? There's an interesting fact that's maybe helping you here. Did you know that 90% of car drivers think that they are above average car drivers? And the same applies to researchers. 90% of researchers, I think even 95% of researchers think they are above average researchers. So we are pretty bad at reflecting and thinking about ourselves. And the same applies to middle management, who feel very safe about what they are doing. But now you have to create this change. And the question is, how do you do that without creating, a fear that their role is in danger?
Right. So, training, I think, goes a long way. I always like to start with training because it's a safe space and you're there to learn. There's no expectations from you. I think showing videos, talking a lot about it, assessing your mindset.
Okay, that is a good point. How do you initiate change without creating fear? Use training, because training officially is this safe space, and after the training it's not like you have to behave somehow differently. It's just this training at the first step. And then Maureen says you have to assess their mindset. So we actually wrote a whole blog article on this agile mindset. So if you are interested in that, feel free to check it out. It actually also includes a little mindset test that is supposed to do exactly that, to help people reflect on their own behavior and thinking. Now, what is another thing that you can do to work on middle management?
And then I would also say that having a personal relationship with those people, if you're trying to guide or coach them, is really important. People don't care how much you know until they know you care. So I think really understanding their personal journey is important.
Okay, no matter if you have external coaches or an internal agile center of excellence, you have to build a relationship, a personal relationship with middle management to really understand their perspective and their background. And then you also should make aware of this effect explained by Philip.
A lot of times, if we talk about coaches, I think we sometimes slip into some bad habits, meaning we are coaching on a push as opposed to a pull basis. So certainly there are occasions where you need to be assertive, but I think you do need to find this balance, right? I think if it always feels like coaches are just sort of diving in as opposed to arriving because there's some kind of an invitation for help, I think you do have to find that balance, because in the absence of that, you're going to tend to get a different reaction from people, and understandably so. So I think that's important.
I think you have to give people the training and the time, and show them why this is important, and kind of give them a vision of what this could look like, right? That sort of postcard from the future, right? This is what things could be. Hey, have you taken a vacation? Do you want to sometimes log off at 5 and have dinner with your family? Do you want to be that promoter, right? That developer of other people? Because at the end of the day, that's really powerful to know that you could really change people's lives, and you have to believe that people are there because they want to contribute. Everybody is doing their best, and people want to be part of success. Showing some encouragement to some of those people can really turn things around for them, right? And they may become your best employees and leaders.
The postcard from the future, that's actually a nice little exercise. And generally, this personal vision, and also on team and organizational level, having this very attractive vision of the goal that you want to reach, that is really important. We heard this so often. Basically everyone said to us that this plays a key role. If you are interested in a specific workshop and more thoughts on how to create a vision, we link that within Project Scagile. As a psychologist, one thing is really important to me, which is don't focus too much on the individual, only focusing on the single person. Sami helps me to explain this.
When you link your work to the culture is not where I'm from. The culture is what I'm doing. What's the process? How you are moving documents and the process in your work.
Think about it. What is culture? Imagine you would have to measure culture. What would you do theoretically? What would be the most precise way? It would be to observe behavior. How you behave, that would be your culture, basically. If we turn that around, how do you change culture? You start by changing behavior. That would be the first step. Okay, and how do we change behavior? Well, sometimes people oversee that. You change behavior by implementing new processes. For example, by implementing agile processes. If your leadership team suddenly does an agile retrospective regularly, you actually changed how they behave, and long term you also changed their culture automatically, at least if it's a good retrospective. Maureen puts it in different words.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because everybody wants to change their culture. You hear that all the time, like, oh, we're going to have this culture change. And just because leadership wants to change the culture doesn't mean culture is going to change, right? We know that your habits change first and then culture changes. So first you change the way you work, right? And going back to sort of what Deming says is, if there's a problem with delivery, always look to your system, right? It's not the people that are broken. It's the system that's broken, right? So how do you change the system? And, how do you start to change the habits?
Yeah, again, that is a good point. You can actually see that in the bottom left of the Safe House of Lean. To change culture, you have to change how you organize. From a psychological standpoint, there's one effect that I want to explain here, the so-called fundamental attribution error. Imagine, you would see someone drive really, really fast down the highway, and your first thought is, what an idiot. I don't like this person. He's driving too fast. Now, what you are doing here is attributing the behavior or explaining the behavior of this person by his character, by the person. This person is a bad person and that's why he's driving so fast. What you're not seeing is the situation that the person is in. For example, his wife is pregnant, I don't know. And Jeff Sutherland now, he actually wrote his famous book exactly from that angle, from that perspective. He has a whole chapter on the fundamental attribution error. What you do with Scrum is changing the situation. You're not changing the person, you're changing the whole processes, you're completely new ways of working, and thereby changing the behavior. Not the character, but the situation. I hope that you understand this mechanism, which is one of the key reasons why Scrum is the way it is. If you want to raise awareness to it, we actually have a whole workshop that you can do with your team. In our free ebook, you can download it within Project Scagile. Have a look at chapter 7. So to summarize, using a graphic here, generally behavior and team performance is influenced by three things. It is the situation, the environment, then it is the team itself, and then, we didn't talk about that yet, it is the task itself that the team is doing. Again, more on this within chapter 7 and 8 of our free ebook. Feel free to download it. Okay, let's continue now. What is another thing that you can do to shape culture?
Often we have to figure out what motivates people. I remember an example of one of the teams I was working with. I was told we would never get one of the guys who was going to be the leader on the team convinced to do this. Because his cultural background was, you don't share that, you go off and do your own work and then you come back and bring it to the team. But his frustration was his team was constantly delivering work and he never was able to see what happened with it. So he had no idea. So when we implemented the sprint demos, we did one sprint demo and showed, and he was there and the customers were there and they saw it. And after that, he was bought in. So he became a convert immediately. But that was his pain point, and everybody's pain point is going to be a little bit different. So we have to keep that in mind.
What I really like about this example is it wasn't the person, it was the process, the new ceremonies that changed the view of this person. And then what you also should make sure is that people understand why you are doing this at all.
Start with why. Your direct reports, I don't care what, if you're a C-suite leader, your direct reports, if their reports below them don't know why we're doing what we're doing, if they don't know the purpose of this mission, then you failed as his leader. I have a good friend, and as example, I have a good friend who's an officer in the military, and I think he really sums it up. He goes, he has extreme ownership of ensuring that the private in his team understands the objective. And if they don't, then he needs to listen to them. He needs to address the concern. He needs to get their feedback and get them to that aha moment, even the lowest person in the organization. Because in his world, he goes, if the person who is at the very low is the supply guy, and he doesn't know why this is important and what we're doing, I'm dead.
Okay, so make sure that you have a clear why you are doing this. But you shouldn't just communicate this.
We start with why. Don't just make some PowerPoint deck or town hall and present it out. That we actually are communicating it down at every level and having that one-on-one direct feedback with a group of audiences, having them go questioning us, having them challenging us, and being able to take that feedback and introducing it back into our message.
Make sure that people are challenging your why, that you integrate them in the process of creating and understanding your why. And then be sure that you communicate what all this is not about, and that people don't confuse your why, as you can see here in this example of Steve.
Another thing about transparency is we also have to be very careful about what the goals are of bringing that transparency. Many organizations, they go through and they map out, the lean processes, they map out the value stream for the purpose of headcount. Well, if you're talking about, lowering your costs or cutting heads, guess what? Everybody's going to be defensive. But if you start talking about, and your goal is to create bigger, better products so you can sell more, then you can grow your company. If that's your purpose for doing it, then everybody's going to be far more excited. People want to grow and do good things. No one wants to spend time figuring out if the person next to them is going to be there tomorrow or not. So
typically there are some or many benefits connected to this why and to this transformation for your employees. You should make them aware of these benefits.
Explaining why we're changing, explaining the value, the benefits, explaining that they're going to be empowered. I'm no longer going to make the decisions. You know more about what you're working on than I do. So when you have an issue, I want you to come to me with the issue, but come to me with how you're going to fix the issue. What are your choices? What do you think is best, because you know more about it than I do? They love it. They're like, hold on, I get to tell you what I'm going to do, what I'm going to work on, what I'm going to accomplish. How do people not love that? It's no longer me telling you, I'm going to tell you our priorities, and you tell me what you can deliver.
That's so true. If this transformation is successful, your employees will be a lot more satisfied. Never forget the following.
Agile is all about people, right, over processes and tools, and understanding that collaboration.
People over processes. This transformation is about you. We want to work in a more human-centered way. You have to communicate that. Another key role in communicating this is executive leadership.
In order for the cultural change to be done the right way, again, you have to get leadership buy-in. If you start with the people in the bottom and leadership is not buying in, it's not going to stick. So you have to get leadership to accept the change, to embrace it, to want it. That's the thing. You show them that tipping point. If you can get to here, we're at that tipping point where we can either change and become more predictable, quicker to market, better, happier employees, or we're going to keep doing the same thing and just, slowly go down. So you show them the tipping point, you get their buy-in, and then that starts propagating down.
One of the words that we heard most often in all of our interviews was a leadership team. They are playing a key role. That's why we have a whole webinar on leadership. I recommend to check it out. If the leadership team and executive leadership team is aligned on one thing, this will also help you heavily to communicate with other departments who also play a role in communicating all these new benefits that are coming up.
When looking from a transformation perspective, culture is done the right way when the entire organization has bought in. We can't just look at agile transformations from an IT perspective. We talked about the importance of having executive buy-in earlier. Two other key departments within a traditional organization that's also key for the transformation, I would say, are HR and finance. HR practices have to be aligned with rewarding the proper behavior that you want within your agile transformation, right? So within our agile transformations, right, if an organization is typically very top down in the way that they do their performance reviews, right? I am the manager, I'm going to review my direct reports. That's not very agile. That doesn't lend itself to an agile transformation. Within an agile environment, you want a 360 review process. You want to make sure that managers are reviewing other managers, employees are reviewing other employees that they're working with, and that we're collectively getting that holistic 360 view of a person. And the second point with finance is that we want to make sure that we're not project costing, where we're building teams to address a specific project and then tearing that team apart when that project is over and then reforming it for a new project. We want long living teams, and we need finance to be able to provide the mechanisms and the guardrails to allow us to have long living teams so that we can develop and mature them over time, and they can build those healthy relationships that are going to lead to happy, productive, mature, agile organization. So you need executive leadership to support all those different functions, very much like how an organization works as employees, right? We want to make our superiors look good. We want to make our parents happy, right? So having that constant messaging throughout the organization, working with the proper change managers to making sure that communication is constant and consistent, and then working with the other organizations to making sure that we're not just aligned from a delivery or development standpoint, but also that HR and finance is supporting that effort as well.
Imagine one of the team members would ask, HR, why are we doing this transformation now? And they would give a completely different answer compared to what you are saying. That's why it is so important to communicate with the other departments and to align your communication regarding this. Now let's get to another general approach on how to change culture, introduced by Eric.
Next one, focus on areas of success. So if we're going to start this initiative, let's focus on some area that we know that we have buy-in, that it's going to probably be successful. There's a tendency here that if it's repeated before, it's going to happen again. Success leads to success.
Please let that sink in. What went well? What is a success? Everybody loves to work with successes. There's actually in psychotherapy, there's a whole philosophy about this, thinking about, okay, we have this success. This is an area where you're good at. How can we repeat this? Because it's easier to work with these successes. This is also called bright spot technique in a book called Change by Dan Heath. I can highly recommend to read it. And what you can also do is Google appreciative inquiry, which is another, basically a philosophy of change management that's connected to this. I repeat it, appreciative inquiry. Google it. And now coming from successes, let's go to failures. What role are they playing in transformation?
I mean, that failing is learning is known to everybody. And I think I don't have to stress that. What I want to stress is failing as something that is human, and the importance of showing the humanity of business is also very important.
We talked about that in the beginning. Showing that we are human is really important. But why exactly? I'll build a little psychological model for you based on the Agile Metrics formula. To survive long-term as a business, to create this customer value long-term, we need two things, agility and culture. Now, how do you create this? How do you create culture of innovation? Okay, firstly, to be innovative, people need to be able to communicate their ideas, to share their ideas everywhere and every time, to stimulate new, creative, disruptive ideas. Imagine you'd sit in a room with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and they would be thinking about, creating a new product. You would probably feel like, okay, I won't join the discussion now because my ideas, they will be really bad and they will think that I'm stupid. So no, I will not share my idea here. Okay, I can understand your thought here, but not saying your ideas doesn't create this innovation that we want. So what's missing here is so-called psychological safety. The safety to be yourself and the safety to speak up. Now the last question is, how do we create psychological safety? You build it up through being human, through showing mistakes and being vulnerable. So how do you change culture? How do you create this culture of innovation? Very specifically, you can start with failures. That's what you can work on. The next minutes of this webinar will also focus on failures because it's a very specific thing that you can work on. John is also elaborating on this.
We have to build an environment of psychological safety. And if we're constantly punishing failures, we're hindering our ability to build that psychology of safety within an organization. And therefore, you start to see a lot of anti-patterns develop where people are afraid to bring up issues and impediments, right? They rather hide them out of fear of punishment than bring them to light so that we can actually fix and resolve them.
That was straight to the point. Vivek has a very similar perspective on this.
Failures will always happen no matter what, right? The question is this: how quickly you can recognize it and learn from it. A culture in which failure is not encouraged, it will come to surface eventually at some point in time, but by that time it would be instead of catching it early and stopping it then and there itself, you will catch it much later. It might not be a project failure. It could be that, okay, your project went live, everything is fine, and now ultimately the customer who is consuming the product and services, that has a deficiency, right? So everything which team did, project manager did, IT did, all fine. But your customer is not getting the full value out of whatever you developed. But if you allow somebody to speak up that, hey, you told that this is the value of this customer or this is the pain point, but what we are developing may not address that, or what we are developing, I have an idea which could actually give more value to the customer, which you are trying to deliver, right? So team can come back and they can propose different type of ideas even before we have reached the point of failure.
Okay, now we know that they have to be accepted. We'll go deeper in a second. Before, Eric has a nice example to share.
The group said, oh, we failed. So recently I worked in a group. They had a testing sandbox that had real customer data loaded into it. So this is a violation of corporate policy, having real customer data loaded into a testing sandbox. They wanted to hang the developer. They wanted the person who did it. They said that, well, the solution is simple. We just fire him. Yeah. And I'm like, whoa, hold on. Don't blame John. Okay, don't blame John. I challenged them and said, what they realized is that they didn't do a good job about the data load. And I asked them, can we problem solve around to ensure what we can do in the future to support this, right? How can we learn from this, right? And what they realized is that this became a blameless retro. What they found from the root cause analysis was that, you know what? We can build some better security to protect our customer data. And at the same time, we can ensure like someone like John, a new hire that comes in, doesn't have the same experience. And so having those blameless retros, taking these as learning activities, because honestly, most people at work are not there to be malicious. They're not there to sabotage your company. They're there to deliver value. They're there for that purpose, mastery, and autonomy that they get from working at your company. And so take these not as failures, take these as learning opportunities and pivot from them.
Now Eric is already giving, this perfect learning from the failure. That's just not realistic for every single failure. Philip is giving a nice little story here.
I'll give kind of a sports coaching analogy here. Back in the day when I was, coaching a baseball team in this case, I was, I'd say to these were kids, they're probably 9 or 10 years old. So I would say to them, hey, we actually tend to learn more from games we lose, than we do from games we win. Well, for quite a while, they were pretty much winning all their games, but then they got on a losing streak. So, one of the kids says, oh, I guess we're learning a lot right now, coach. I was like, yeah, I hope so. I think we need to really actually embrace failure in the sense that we can learn from it. And I think we need to openly acknowledge when that's happening.
So we can learn from this, but we don't have to. Kevin is going deeper here.
As an example, if you call your learnings and your failures lessons learned, then you neglect the fact that this mistake might happen again. By calling it lessons learned, you say, hey, we did a mistake and now we have learned our lesson. And that's not very human. And it's not very welcoming of people who are doing the same mistake again. Everybody wants to improve. You don't have to penalize your employees to do less mistakes, in my opinion. It's about fostering this culture of learning, of being open about mistakes, about accepting about mistakes, and by doing that, creating a culture where learning can be done. Take an example. A child falls down, I don't know, 1,000 times before it can walk. If you say after the first time it falls down, now you have learned your lesson and now act accordingly. And if you don't, then I will, you won't get a raise in, I don't know, sweets or television or whatever. This child might never be able to walk by its own. But don't take this as an example that you should treat your employees as children. I'm not saying that. It's just because children are so much better learners than we are.
That is a good point. Don't even call it lessons learned. It's okay to call it failure. Steve is further elaborating on this.
So a few years ago, we were embracing the community of practice and bringing more conversations across the organization. And we ended up in an email chain with lots of leadership and lots of Scrum Masters and product owners involved in it on the discussion of fail fast. Because there was a topic of, we don't want to fail fast, we want to learn fast. And that is the ultimate goal, but why not go ahead and let people know it's okay to fail and to fail fast? Because if we tell people that they have to learn fast, well, then they're going to study. If they do run into a failure, they're not going to bring it up until they have, a solution, until they work through it. And we don't necessarily want that to happen.
So again, it is a myth to say that failures are always connected to a learning. Generally, you have to view failures from a different perspective.
We want the team to go ahead and be okay with, we tried a hypothesis. We went down this path. We spent a short amount of time on it, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever, and we found out this wasn't the right way to go. So we're going to take another path. And now we have to learn from what just happened. So the failure, or I don't even think it's a failure. It's really we had a hypothesis. We proved the hypothesis wrong. So based on that proof, now we can learn from that. So it's that fact that we took the hypothesis and failed. We're now going to save money because we're now going to be able to invest that money in a better area. I don't like the concept of learn fast, which is truly the goal, but let's go ahead and say fail fast because it's okay. It's okay. And what we're really saying is our hypothesis was a no, as opposed to a yes. That's all. And so that gives us a very firm pivot point.
Okay, good hint. You want to pivot. So failures are just the basis to do so.
So it was interesting. We did a training last week for the LPM, and in it, one of the talking items said, if you don't have a lot of pivots, right, that means you're not innovating, right? And pivot means that you thought you were going to get some benefit and then you tested the market and you have to pivot, right? You're going to pivot customer segment. You're going to pivot to maybe the features that were being delivered, whatever the pivot might be. But if you're not seeing a lot of those pivots, that means you're not testing. That means you're not innovating. You're not testing the market, right? Because of all the hypotheses that we might have of what the benefit is that we're delivering, what percent do you think are really on track? 50, 25%?
Now Sean is giving a very nice example of a so-called pivot or failure that definitely had an impact on culture.
One of the organizations I was at, we actually were trying to put something in the market, but the market changed. And, we had to stop. We called a meeting. We got the whole train together and said, I know we've been working on this, but market conditions have changed. This will no longer be profitable. It is no longer what the market needs or wants. We are going to pivot. We are going to start fresh. So it was, from a leadership, gathering the team around and say, you've done great hard work, but we need to reset. We are going to have an emergency planning meeting. We are pivoting, we're resetting. It's okay. So then they saw it from leadership that it is okay. Sometimes you have to pivot. Yes, we've spent some money on it, but it's better to cut our losses now than to keep spending money on something that's not going to make us any money. So they saw that and they've accepted. They're like, wow, you guys can change, things can happen and we can just stop. And you guys aren't mad. Nobody's throwing a fit. Nobody's getting fired. Nobody's getting a box and walking out.
Wow, that is how it's supposed to be. And Sean is actually living it or showing it that if you want to accelerate your culture of failure, you have to live it on executive and leadership level.
Currently, I'm an RTE, and I will have mistakes in a presentation. Hey, and I'll say, look, I have the wrong date. I'm human. It's okay. So if they can see that leadership admits it's okay, accepts, embraces, we're all human. They're not on pins and needles worrying about, well, if I do this, what are the ramifications?
And not just at the team level, but also at the executive level, right? They need to understand that they influence the behavior across the entire organization, and therefore need to be in that role model to be able to accept the failure of themselves, their peers at that level, so the people that are working below them feel that psychological safety, are able to do the same. So I think it's always a key point, for an organization that's not used to that type of behavior, being very deliberate about it, building that into their town hall meetings, their quarterly meetings, where as a leadership team, they're saying, well, our biggest failure or my biggest failure this quarter was this, talking about it, talking about how they're going to resolve that. Those are the companies that people love coming to work for every day. So definitely building that psychology of safety, I would say is a requirement for successful transformation.
John is also giving a very specific best practice for probably more mature organizations that you can do.
Many years ago, when I was a Scrum Master, one thing that I would do every quarter is I would create a failure award. And people would nominate, they would come up and talk about their failures. And whoever had the most spectacular failure would get an award. So building that culture where we're rewarding failure, and I will give the caveat, not only are we rewarding the failure, but we're rewarding what they did to fix it so it doesn't happen again, and how they could share that lessons learned with the rest of the organization. So there's two parts to that award. But really building that culture to encourage that psychological safety within the organization is going to allow for a healthy transformation.
Having a failure award is a huge step. What you could also do is a fuck up night, or one fuck up night. That would be also a first step, and you could be the one who starts. I mean, yeah, I'm talking to you now. You could be the one, giving some failures to show that you are human. Anyone who shares failures, maybe including learnings, but it doesn't have to be, is a win for your transformation. And especially if it's you as a servant leader and role modeling what you want to see. Now, for everything that we just heard, you can put it in one place that Philip is hitting on.
For anybody who's familiar with the Management 3.0 website or any of the practices on there, one of the practices they call a culture book. And so, there you can find lots of examples of this from various companies. One that's floated around for a long time is the one by Netflix, but there are many of these, and it basically speaks to getting back to the why of the organization. It really speaks nicely to what does that look like, and that just doesn't simply have to be limited to organizational mission. It can go into all sorts of areas, like what do we care about as an organization in terms of how we treat our people, right? What do our people care about? Have we, do we really understand what our employees actually think is important? And if we don't, I think we need to take the time to figure out what that looks like. So the culture book, is certainly a great way to do that.
A culture book could be a place where all of the things that you are implementing culturally could come together. Similar to the 5 Scrum values, for example, it gives you a guideline. And the nice thing about this is that you could theoretically also measure this. We are talking a lot about this in the Agile Metrics webinar. Feel free to check it out. And if you measure this through, for example, surveys, you can talk about it in your retrospectives to make sure that everything is getting implemented. But what you have to be sure about when implementing a culture book is this one.
Be agile from the beginning. Be agile. Change. Be able to change. Even if a small step every day. that change.
So even with this culture book, you should be agile. You should regularly think about, okay, are these still our goals? Or maybe we have too many goals, that's something that I hear very often from companies that are implementing objectives and key results, OKR, that they have too many goals. One last interesting thought on how to change culture is by Kevin.
If you are in charge of a company or a part of a company that needs fundamental change, I think a retrospective and good agile coaches to facilitate those is a very good starting point, so that the change can start or can grow from the bottom up.
Again, what I really like about this is that it is something very specific that you can work on, implementing good, valuable retrospectives. I mean, there's a reason for this popular citation you may know. If you implement only one thing, let it be retrospectives, everything else will follow. We actually have a whole webinar on Agile retrospectives. If you like this webinar so far, feel free to register for the other one. And then the other thing that you can do to change behavior within your Agile transformation and to make sure that your Agile transformation is heading in the right direction is setting the right Agile cultural KPIs, Agile metrics.
Cultural metrics, I think, are a huge point, and they're often overlooked.
Also, any kind of satisfaction surveys, right? Employee engagement, because at the end of the day, happier employees are more productive employees.
Again, we have a whole webinar on Agile metrics, including cultural metrics. Feel free to check it out. And that is, by the way, exactly how our tool Echometer is working, combining cultural metrics with retrospectives to help Scrum Masters who are playing this key role implement this culture change. So to summarize, the key point of this webinar, in my opinion, be human, be vulnerable, especially on middle management, on leadership level. This is where you have to keep an eye on.
All right, that was it. I really hope that you liked it. What would be great if you should be able, on the right side of the screen now, you should be able to see a little survey. Just one question, one click of how much you liked this webinar. It would be really helpful for us if you give us this quick feedback. And then, two other thoughts. The advantage of this, on-demand webinars is that we can repeat this, and we will someday definitely repeat this. So if you liked it, feel free to share it with your colleagues or somewhere else, because then they can also view this webinar. The disadvantage is that you're not able to share experiences directly of the attendees today. So what we thought of here is actually two things. Firstly, what you can do is an Agile maturity assessment, which basically is a quick survey that you should be able to see now. And it basically helps you to prioritize and to challenge your current tasks and actions and generally your Agile roadmap, thinking about, okay, are we working on the right things at the moment? That's what it's about, to challenge you and to see, what is your maturity level. And on the other hand, if you want to, you can also say, okay, I would be interested to be connected to other companies, other organizations who have a similar maturity level, because that's what we would do then in the next step, to connect you directly and to make sure that that you can at least profit from each other. So feel free to do so. And then obviously, as again, this is sponsored by Echometer. So if you want to learn more about Echometer and how we could maybe help you, or this our retrospective and health check tool, feel free to visit our website. I guess that was it. Let me quickly check. Yes, okay. Thanks a lot for joining again. You will now ultimately be redirected also. Have a great day. Thanks a lot. Till next week, maybe.